From WABE in Atlanta, this is Savory Stories, a show where we take a look at Atlanta's people through its cuisine and food history.
On this podcast, we trace Atlanta's food story from the past to the present, getting to know Atlanta's culinary creators and demystifying stereotypes about food.
I'm Akilah McConnell, culinary historian and owner of Unexpected Atlanta Tours, the #1 rated tour company in Atlanta on TripAdvisor.
And I'm Chef Asita Reed, owner of Life Chef, where we help you live a life you love, and author of How to Feed a Kid, a Parent's Guide. Today, we are talking about that springtime favorite, the farmer's market.
Farmers markets have always been an important part of Atlanta's food story, and today we're going to share why they matter, how they have evolved, and where you should be buying your produce this spring.
One of my favorite things to do is just waste away time on the weekend, strolling through the farmer's market and seeing what goods they have available.
Absolutely. That's a guilty pleasure of mine as well, even when my refrigerator is fully stocked.
I think it's a great opportunity to chat with the farmers and make real connections in the community.
You're right, and markets are integral to human civilization. Since prehistoric times and the foundation of early civilizations, people have traded goods at markets. And while the earliest recorded markets are from ancient Turkey in 6000 BCE, our modern markets have many of the same features of those ancient markets. So there's kind of three things you need to know about defining a market.
Okay.
First, one of the defining features of any market is open space in which buyers and sellers can trade for goods, though that open space might be either inside or outside.
Okay.
Second, markets can be permanent or they can be temporary. In ancient Rome, for example, there were permanent markets built at Trajan's Forum for weekly groceries, and then temporary markets popped up during the holiday season or festivals in ancient Rome, just the way we have Christmas markets today.
Ooh, I love a good market at a festival, especially if they have samples.
Samples are totally critical, but the most important feature of a market is that it is organized selling, and usually organized by a city or community. In other words, anybody can sell products on the street, but what makes a market different is that the city or community has organized many sellers in one place at one time to sell many types of good. A market has a level of organization with many sellers and buyers that speaks to the authority of that city or community.
So a vendor at a market is considered more reputable than someone selling goods on the street? Vendors at a market have been vouched for, so to speak, in order to participate in the market, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that level of organization is very important and actually speaks to a lot of the market history of Atlanta. So backing it way back, before Europeans landed in the Americas, for tens of thousands of years, indigenous people occupied these lands. The Cherokee and Muskogee who lived in Middle and North Georgia were particularly adept at agriculture, and they maintained a giant network of trade routes. The Muskogee would meet with each other and trade goods, and while these weren't permanent markers, these temporary trade fairs were important to barter or trade for goods. When the Europeans first colonized the state of Georgia, they actually traded extensively with both the Muskogee and the Cherokee. There were numerous reports of fur trading located in the land that became Atlanta.
I suspect without these trading sessions, the colonists wouldn't have been able to make it for very long.
Definitely not, because the colonists needed the food that the indigenous people were producing. Now, as we know, the United States took the indigenous lands, and the small town of Terminus was formed in 1837. But at that time, there was no organization here. So early on, there was no market. In fact, fresh meat used to be hawked around town in a cart, which is definitely not sanitary, and produce was sold at just a few dry goods stores. But by 1848, the town of Atlanta had grown larger with about 1,000 residents, and a market was developed which took place on a specific day. There was an early resident named George Smith who described the market day this way, and I quote, "Atlanta, being the only railroad center for miles around, had a very fair trade in country produce. The countrymen brought their chickens, eggs, and butters into Atlanta from the country. The average farmer did not make much profit, for eggs sold at about 4 or 5 cents a dozen, butter at 7 to 10 cents a pound." And I'll translate those numbers for you. That's about $1.56 for a dozen eggs or $2.73 for a pound of butter. I wish we had those prices today.
I know that's right, especially farm fresh eggs. Goodness. Now, when I think of farmers markets, I tend to think of produce. This sounds a lot more like it was based on meat, eggs, and dairy.
Yeah, and that's because most people had their own garden. They grew their own potatoes, their onions, their peas, and their beans. And the type of market that we're talking about, it was more of a temporary style market that we discussed where farmers came in and sold their goods.
I see. So when did Atlanta start having more permanent markets?
Well, the first central market began to take shape in 1853, about 6 years after the founding of Atlanta. Stalls were built and rented for $285, or around $11,000 today.
Oof.
And the city council set the opening time for the market at about an hour before sunrise until 7 in the evening. Farmers paid a small tax so that they could supply fresh meat and vegetables, and this was meant to be a market for local producers. In fact, the town prohibited anyone from bringing produce or bacon for sale unless the seller could bring in a witness to testify that the seller grew that produce or that bacon or raised it himself. This market was first built in what is now South Downtown on a street that was naturally named Market Street.
Oh, wow. Thanks for making that connection. It never even occurred to me that Market Street wasn't just an arbitrary name. All right. So around this time in Atlanta, commerce had to be affected by the Civil War, right?
It definitely was. And there were some markets during the Civil War, but not much food in the city at that time. So when the Civil War ended, the city leaders actually enticed farmers to re-enter the city by building 2 new market houses in which butchers and greengrocers could rent stalls. This was the signal to the city that Atlanta was organized and open again, because people were kind of hesitant about coming back here at first. But in the 1890s, the market concept began to lose momentum in Atlanta as grocery stores began to emerge, especially as electricity took over the city, with grocery stores open in any weather and in the day or the night. The advantage of the grocery store is, of course, everything is indoors versus an outdoor market.
Yeah, I can see how modernization and convenience positioned those indoor, all-weather grocers to be the preferred choice of shoppers, who were mostly women at this point. When we come back from the break, we'll talk about the role that women played in Atlanta's market history.
In 1918, at the height of World War I, the Atlanta Women's Club met with the city to discuss setting up a citywide market focused on Georgia produce and meats. This would be the first of its kind since Reconstruction. They envisioned this as an open-air market, and it was a huge success. Soon, the Atlanta Women's Club raised $300,000, or about $6 million in today's money, to build a permanent fireproof structure, which opened in 1924 as the Municipal Market. Now, this was the segregated era, and African Americans were not allowed to sell their goods inside, but they set up a busy curb market on Edgewood Street that competed with the interior market. The exterior curb market became as popular as the interior municipal market, and soon both came to be known unofficially as the Sweet Auburn Curb Market.
Oh, that's right. Atlanta OGs like my stepdad still refer to that area as the curb market. And I always wondered why, because the building clearly says Municipal Market. That is a great place to pop in for lunch. I had my first arepa there back when Arepa Mia was there. And look, Mimi's Falafel at Metro Deli Soul Food, delicious.
Absolutely. Huge fan of Metro Deli, their falafels. Actually, just all of it.
All of it.
All of it. In 2024, the Municipal Market turns 100 years old, an achievement that no other food market in Atlanta can claim. I personally love the market. It's one of my fave food destinations in the city. In fact, my tour company, Unexpected Atlanta, we run food tours with biscuit making classes in the Municipal Market every week. And you know, the funny thing is, Asada, we often get folks who have lived in Atlanta for decades, and they tell us we've never experienced the fun of Atlanta's only indoor public market.
Wow, I'm really glad that you give people the opportunity to get to know the Municipal Market. And I really can't believe it's a city's only indoor public market.
Yeah, it takes a lot of people by surprise. And, you know, I'm sure some of you were thinking to yourself, wait, what about your DeKalb Farmers Market and Pond City Market and Krog Street Market? Well, I don't actually count any of those as actual market, using this definition of needing community or city organization. And that's because all of those are privately owned stores. Your DeKalb Farmers Market is kind of like a giant grocery store. And Pont City Market and Krog Street Market are privately owned buildings that have created a shopping center. The distinction is that markets are community or city owned and created for the community good.
Okay, well, thanks for clearing that up, Akila. I want to bring up a local organization, Community Farmers Markets, that imagines Atlanta as home to a diverse, interconnected food system that promotes healthy food, sustainable ecosystems, and living wage working conditions. CFM started in 2011 to meet the demand for efficiently managed, community-based, sustainable farmers markets. These are the markets I often find myself wandering through on the weekends. You can find them generally from March through to November, although a couple of them are all year round, in Oakhurst, Grant Park, Decatur, East Atlanta Village, and the Virginia Highlands.
CFM is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization, and I just love that they have this focus on addressing food access and security.
Yes, as a part of their work in food access and equity, CFM also hosts MARTA markets at multiple MARTA stations across the city, and I love the variety available in CFM markets and how each one reflects the community where they operate. It's also worth noting that the CFM is partnered with Wholesome Wave Georgia so that folks who receive SNAP and EBT benefits can double their spending power of farm fresh items at those markets through the Fresh for Less program.
The idea of the MARTA market is particularly brilliant because they're providing farmers markets at locations that may often be in the middle of food deserts, like the Five Points MARTA station, which is about a mile away from the nearest grocery store or market.
I caught up with Katie Hayes, founding executive director of CFM, to learn more about their commitment to connecting farmers to the community. Besides being a stellar human being, she is a native ATLian and has been an innovator of Atlanta's local food scene. Over the years, I've seen these markets grow into thriving communities where local chefs come to do demos. There are products for humans and pets. There's live music, breads, honey, herbs, cheeses, and ready-to-eat foods. And each market is just a whole vibe.
So the original vision of community farmers markets was to create more organization behind farmers markets. At the time when we were started, a lot of markets were volunteer run or had a lot of turnover in staff from season to season, and there wasn't much structure behind them. So we wanted to create an organization that provided essentially administrative support and organization to farmers markets to make them more professional so that they'd be more legitimate in the scheme of places you could go shopping. Over the years, we've definitely accomplished that and more, and really shifted our focus to creating more opportunities for consumers and producers to connect, whether that be at a traditional farmers market or our fresh MARTA markets, or even at one of our pop-up events. So the MARTA markets were started as a pilot program back in 2015 to figure out how we could get access to food in the communities where we have the lowest access and lowest income in Atlanta. It's evolved over the years into different iterations of the project, including farm stands at 7 different stations operating 8 days a week, and really trying to bridge the gap in Atlanta of transportation, access to food, and access to jobs. So we're trying to meet people where they are every day on their daily commute. One of the things that I've always loved about farmers markets, whether that's markets here in Atlanta or through my travels around the world, is just the amount of culture and community that you experience at markets. People from all walks of life come to gather over this commonality of this basic need that we have of food. There was not a lot of places like that for me growing up in Atlanta, and I think historically Atlanta has been a pretty divided and segregated city. But at the farmers markets, people come together. Our diverse vendors, we work with over 160 vendors, diverse shoppers. We see over 200,000 shoppers a year across all of our markets. And it just brings people together in a way that no other experience that I've seen in Atlanta do. And so just really that creation of culture and the building of community that's just so valuable.
I loved hearing that from Katie. Such inspirational work that they're doing.
Each year, CFM honors women in the Atlanta local food movement on or around International Women's Day. And last year, I was honored to be chosen as one of the Lady Locavore honorees for my advocacy and education work. Akila, you can find me at the Grant Park Farmers Market on any given Sunday. But what are some of your favorite market spots?
Well, congratulations on that honor. So well deserved.
Thank you.
But I am a huge fan of the Avondale Estates Farmers Market, as well as the Freedom Farmers Market at the Carter Center, both of which are year-round markets. I think there's also this perception, Asada, that farmers markets might be more expensive than a grocery store like Publix or Kroger, but that's often not the case, especially when it comes to seasonal fresh produce. In the summertime, you can find great prices on eggplant and tomatoes, and in the winter on squash and broccoli.
Yeah, it's the whole supply and demand thing. When the supply is high, the prices go down, and that's why you save a bunch of money when you shop from these local farmers. Years ago, I led a chef demo at the East Atlanta market, and after wandering around and chatting with the vendors, I decided to make a grilled peach pizza. I picked up all of the ingredients right there and headed over to the chef station where I had a flat top griddle. As I heated up the fresh flatbread and brushed it with the olive oil, then I sliced the peaches and drizzled them with a little olive oil and sea salt. Then I added them to the grill, and then I made a vinaigrette with balsamic vinegar from one of the vendors and brushed that onto the peaches so that they could caramelize. And then I assembled the pizza. I topped the flatbread that had now gotten those delicious crispy edges with the peaches, fresh basil, and burrata cheese, and then drizzled a little more of that vinaigrette on top. It was so simple, so fresh, and everything was straight from the market.
Oh my gosh, you're making me so hungry. And one of my very favorite reasons to hit a farmer's market is for those peaches. Mm-hmm. At least where I go to, there's usually a 20-person line to get a giant bag of Lane peaches each Saturday in the summer.
Absolutely. And while farmers markets definitely check the aesthetic and experience boxes, their importance is much deeper than that. Farmers markets are a way of building community and keeping local money in a local economy. It's how we can support and grow small businesses that farm and produce food and create flourishing relationships with the people closest to our food. Through the pandemic, we saw so many issues with harvesting and distribution, and many people for the first time had to get to know their local growers and markets. I hope we can continue to intentionally shop and support our local markets, farmers, and restaurants for Atlanta to become a strong food system.
Thank you all for joining Savory Stories. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you do that kind of thing with your favorite podcasts.
We'll be back in a few weeks with a new episode. See you then.
Savory Stories is produced by Crystal Devone and Kevin Rinker, with additional production and editing from Scotty Crow. The series was created by Summer Evans and premiered on City Lights with Lois Reitzes. For more, visit wabe.org/Savory Stories.
WABE.